Great. So, hi everyone. As Camille has mentioned, my name is Marcus. It's a pleasure to meet you all. And today, or rather for this month, we will be talking about the 12 ways multi-factor authentication can be hacked and how to best defend against it. All right, let's get started. So first of all, I'll give a little bit of introduction about myself. So like I said, I am Marcus. I'm the head of GRC at Anywhere Systems. And a little bit about me, I guess I've always come from a compliance background. I used to work in accounting where I did a compliance with IFRS and ASPE standards. Then I went into the Canada Revenue Agency where I did tax compliance. And now that I'm in cybersecurity, as the cybersecurity compliance, you might as well say my middle name is compliance at this point. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Let's go on. So yeah, we're in our 39th year of business. So by no means at all we are a green sprout. We are not a green sprout in this field. People always ask me, why do our clients stay with us for 10 plus years? And the answer is, we actually get back to you. You know, there's an undeniable level of service commitment we have that the bigger players just don't. Now let's talk a little bit about our services. So the first thing that we want to offer, or that I want to talk about that we offer, is the monitoring, detection, and response. You know, we all go to sleep, but the attackers don't. Who's going to look after your system if there's a system compromise? In the precious minutes before there's irreparable damage to your system, our 24 by 7 by 365 days a year security operations center will manage that risk for you. And much like many of our other services, we do follow professional frameworks and protocol in our service offering. So, for example, in this case, we follow NIST SP 800-61, which is the incident handling response protocol. And lastly, we offer GRC services. I love this topic because it's my department. We do help you with a lot of things. So we determine your information security strategy. We help build your risk assessment, your asset identification, and last but not least, we give you your security policy. We build it for you. Security policy is not much without the proper implementation of awareness, because what's the point of policy if your employees don't even know of it? So that's why we also implement a security training program, and all of this is bundled in our GRC services. Okay, moving on. So the actual topic of today is going to be talking about MFA, but there's a lot of kind of cyber threats that hide behind this, right? So what are the real threats that result in us implementing something like MFA? And the topic that I want to talk about is phishing. You know, what is phishing? By the book, phishing is a type of fraudulent email designed to trick a person into revealing sensitive information or to deploy something like malware. This is a type of social engineering. There's many other types, but this is the one that we'll talk about today. As you can see on the screen, there's a lot of these statistics, and they're all very interesting, but I'll talk about the ones that I consider interesting. So, for example, 60% of mid-sized businesses that have asked their employees to work remotely experience a cyber attack. In 2022, this is just a recent statistic, 6 billion attacks are expected to occur. Billion with a B. 1 in 99 emails is a phishing attack. And if this doesn't scare you, 25% of those emails make their way into your Office 365 mailbox, right? Phishing websites have doubled. You know, it's been 400% increase year over year since 2020, and 90% of data breaches are due to phishing. So this is no joke. You know, phishing is a serious threat that is infecting the entire landscape of how we consider security from a cybersecurity standpoint. And I'll give a quick example. So have you guys ever watched the movie The Interview back in 2014? You know, it's by Seth Rogen, James Franco starring them. It's just like a satirical movie where some assassins travel, or like FBI agents or whatever. They travel to North Korea to get rid of their dictator. As you know, obviously North Korea wasn't too happy with this, so they implemented something like a cyber attack. And basically what happened to Sony was phishing emails were sent in masquerading as Apple Care, and it prompted the user to sign in. Now, these are not just regular users. These were serious high-level users, C-level users, or even IT staff that had certain permissions. They were working off of the coincidence. These hackers were working off of the basis that the user's Apple login is the same as their work credentials. And believe it or not, it worked. Wiper malware spread everywhere. Leak of PII, leak of PHI, Sony Media, all of that. And it just resulted in this whole debacle where there was a lot of controversy involved. Sony took an enormous hit. And from this thing, as leaders of our own organizations, there's some lessons we can learn from this, right? First off, everyone is a target, right? If you think this just happens to the little guys, think again, right? Even a company as large as Sony can get targeted by something like a phishing attack and receive crazy damage from it. Next up is you always want to put qualified and proactive people in lead of these information security roles, right? When we look at Sony as a whole, it just really goes to show how weak and outdated their security controls really were. Lastly, we want to make sure that it's not too easy, right? Don't put Wi-Fi passwords on the wall, having computer logins on sticky notes, using reused passwords, 6-character passwords, no upper, lower, special case, and what have you. All of those things, right? All of those things you want to avoid. It's critically important to build good policy and document it. NIST 800-37, Risk Management Framework. This serves as a framework for people in your organization to work together in achieving their business goals. So you can tell your employees what to do and to set a standard, but where's the evidence? No, really, where's the evidence? Where is the standard laid out? Policy is management's intent, and you have to document it. If your employees don't sign off, they're not liable. You are the one that will be liable for whatever damages your company faces as a result of a successful phishing attack. Until you build good policy and good awareness and training around it, this kind of thing will act as your shield and armor in this ever-growing landscape of threats. Next up, I want to talk about the fact that technology is always a moving target, right? Remember back in the day when we thought 8-character passwords were recommended and you thought that was long? Nowadays, because of a theory I like to refer to often, it's called the Moore's Law. It's essentially saying that the transistors in your CPU will double every 2 years. It's exponential. So, for example, let's take the password secures1, for example. It's a typical 8-character password. You got characters. You even got a number in there. In 2005, it would have taken over 6 days for this password to get brute force and cracked. 10 years later, in 2015, it would only take 2 days. Can anybody guess how long it would take for that password to get cracked today? Any guesses? 1 hour. So how can we protect ourselves? Really, it's a matter of acting. There's some things you can add in. For example, you can put letters to your numbers or numbers to your letters. If we were to take the password 1 to 9, for example, this kind of password can get cracked 431 times in the blink of an eye. But if you add a simple character in there, like an A, this password can now get cracked when the Oscar Award winner Leonardo DiCaprio is 84 years old. There's another thing you can do where you can combine ASCII characters. So let's take the regular password, for example. This kind of password can get cracked just under the amount of time it would take for lightning to strike twice. But if you were to replace the A with an @ the 0 with an O, and what have you, this kind of password can get cracked in the same amount of time it took to carve Mount Rushmore. And even this kind of practice, we do not recommend to our clients who truly want to protect themselves from risk, because we have a standard for password complexity, and that kind of standard is business business certified approved. The last thing I want to recommend is cyber insurance. This is a topic I'll talk about very shortly later in a future slide. But in terms of other ways we can protect ourselves, the number one thing we can do is one of the things we can do is implement a password management system. In this case, you don't have to memorize all your passwords. You don't have to be worried about having a super long password you don't remember. You just get the system. Now this password manager will memorize it for you. It'll enter the password for you. It makes your life easier. The second thing you can do, like I talked about earlier, was cyber insurance. In this day and age, cyber insurance is a must. You simply cannot hold that risk to yourself. And that's why getting cyber insurance, having a proper company to transfer the risk to, is something that we definitely recommend to have. It's a must-have at this point. And last but definitely not least, MFA. Multi-factor authentication. It's always the first thing I talk to my clients about, and it's the first thing I always recommend. This is definitely a must-have, implementing something like MFA. And we'll dive a little bit into it. So, from a technical standpoint, we'll analyze MFA in today's webinar. And, there are certain reasons we do MFA. It provides a lot of protection, but there are also ways to defeat it. With today's knowledge, you will be able to know how to properly implement MFA in the future. You'll learn ways to compromise it, you'll learn to circumvent it, and most importantly, you'll learn ways to implement it properly. And with that being said, I'm going to pass on the baton to Roger here. I'm sure you all know Roger. He is somewhat of a celebrity even in the cybersecurity space. And he's going to be talking to us more analytically and technically about MFA. So Roger, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marcus and Camille and everybody for being here. Let me share my slides. Stand by. And here we go. There we go. Can everybody see my slides?
Yep, you can see it.
Okay.
Thanks, Roger.
So again, thanks for the introduction. I've been doing computer security for 34 years, a lot of it consulting on multi-factor authentication. I've written 13 books, over 1,200 magazine articles, including a book called Hacking Multi-Factor Authentication. So I'm going to share with you some of the ways to hack MFA or bypass MFA and educate you so that you don't become one of the victims where it gets bypassed. I worked for Nova4. We're the world's largest integrated security awareness training and simulated phishing platform vendor. Meaning we try to help people not to be phished, and as Mark has talked about, social engineering is involved in about 90% of all successful attacks, and social engineering can get around a lot of MFA as well, and we'll talk about that. I'll quickly talk about MFA, show you a bunch of different ways to hack it over the next 40 minutes, and then lessons and recommendations. But I think all of us know to log in to a computer system, you have these different authentication factors. There's these traditional 3 different types: something you know, something you have, something you are. Something you know would be like a password or a PIN, or maybe you're connecting the dots on your screen. Something you have would be like a USB token, maybe like a YubiKey, or maybe you're getting some code off a phone or a smart card or something like that. Or it could be something you are, biometric. So those are very common, fingerprint scanners, facial recognition scanners, things like that. So those are the traditional authentication factors. And when you're doing multi-factor authentication, the idea is that you would have 2 or more of these factors, and it's just harder for a adversary to supposedly to compromise you than using a login name and password. Also know today there's a lot of other factors that might be considered authentication factors, what we call contextual factors or behavioral analytics factors, like, are you coming from the same laptop that you normally come from? Are you coming from the same location? Are you using the same browser? Could you be coming from Tampa, Florida right now, but then China 2 hours later? Probably not. They'll even sometimes measure how long it takes you to type in your password, called keystroke dynamics. If you've ever been to a website where they ask you for your logon name and then you hit next, usually they're then measuring your password, and you may type in your password correctly, or an attacker could have your password and type it in correctly, but the authentication system may note that it was put in using a strange rhythm or timing. So you have all these, again, additional factors that you log in with multi-factor authentication. All things considered, multi-factor authentication is usually better than single factor, like login name and password, or even, if you plug in a USB key and you just, hit it, that's actually single factor. You should really have to put in a PIN as well or something like that to make it multi-factor. We should use multi-factor authentication where we can, although we really need to use what's called phishing resistant MFA. And I'm going to talk about what that is, and we'll talk about a lot more the rest of this talk. But let me say that again, we should all use multi-factor authentication whenever we can to protect valuable data. But the reality is that a lot of it, 95% of it, is easily phishable, as easy to get around as if you had a password. And so we really should strive to use phishing resistant MFA. And overall, just know that all MFA can be hacked, all MFA can be bypassed. MFA is not unhackable. And I'm going to give you some examples over the next 30, 45 minutes about it. The most common way that MFA can be bypassed or hacked around is called network session hijacking. This has been around. The first time I saw this and wrote about this was in the early 1990s. But this is when an attacker convinces a victim to click on a bogus link that really takes them to what's called a man-in-the-middle website. So the victim gets an email that is enticing them to go to a particular website, and MFA may or may not be enabled. But let's assume for today that MFA is enabled on that website. But if the victim doesn't realize the link is bad, is rogue, and they click on it, it could redirect them to what's called a man-in-the-middle website or proxy, and then direct them to the real website. But because they've now really connected to the man-in-the-middle website, everything the victim types in, so login name, password, PIN, the MFA code or whatever, that can be captured by the man-in-the-middle website. And anything the real website sends back to the victim can be captured by the man-in-the-middle website. So the really common thing is what's called an access control token. After anyone logs in successfully to a website, no matter how they do it, every website will always send back what's called a cookie, an access control token cookie. It's just a text file that has some sort of, usually it's hexadecimal letters and numbers that are kind of like an ID for the user. It's essentially the user's like license to tell the website, oh, this person has authenticated and can now see everything that they're supposed to see. Well, if the end user has been tricked into a man-in-the-middle website, the attacker can see that, the attacker can capture that access control token cookie and take over the victim's session. And I'm going to show you an attack, or actually Kevin Mitnick, he's our chief hacking officer. He's got a video where he's going to kind of show you how it's done. But essentially, again, this works against 90–95% of MFA, and that if a bad guy can convince a victim to click on a rogue link that they think is the real link, they then can capture all the information sent to and from the victim from the real website and then take over that victim's session. Again, Kevin Mitnick's going to do this demo. Let me see, I'm going to make sure that we're having text come across. And if not, I'll speak to it if the text isn't coming across. But this can be a demo by Kevin Mitnick, and it may be narrated by me. We'll see how this goes in just a second. But this is a shorter version of the demo. This is like a 2-minute version. If you want to watch the whole 6 or 8-minute version, I got a link there. You can download the slide deck later on and go to that longer demo. But here it is. Again, this can be Kevin being both kind of the victim and the attacker, and then capturing the victim's access control token after they've logged in with multi-factor authentication. So what's happened so far is that the victim has been tricked into clicking on a fake link, and instead of it saying linkedin.com, what they've really been tricked into connecting to is linkedin.com, not linkedin.com. And so that's a man-in-the-middle website that is now connecting them to the real LinkedIn website, and the attacker is going to capture, as the victim types in their login name and password, it's going to capture that information along with some other stuff. You should be able to hear the video now, or the audio now. Whoops, let's try this again. So here we are on an inbox, a regular looking inbox, and one of those emails has a phishing email. Kevin's going to click on it. It looks like just a normal email from somebody saying, hey, let's connect on LinkedIn. But this is a phishing email, and if the victim was looking at the URL, they'd see that it's LLinkdin.com, not LinkedIn.com. But a lot of people would miss that, think it was from LinkedIn, and then clicked on the button. When they clicked on the button, if they didn't realize it was taken to the wrong place, if you look up in the top hand side there, it's LLinkdin, not LinkedIn. But really what this is a man-in-the-middle website that's capturing when the victim types in their login name and password. And even LinkedIn is going to prompt the victim to input their MFA credentials after they put in their login name and password. But really what the victim is connected to is a man-in-the-middle website that is capturing all that information, the login name, the password, and the multi-factor authentication code that they type on in here. So, the person gets sent the code, they type it in, they think they're putting it to the real website, but really it's a fake website that's capturing it. If you look behind the scenes there, the hacker, using their hacking tool behind the scenes, has captured the login name and password. The victim is actually in on the real website right now. It has passed them through to the real website. But this is what the hacker captures. You can see email address, password, and what's called the access control token cookie. They could have, if they wanted to, captured that 4 or 6 digit code that they typed on in, but they really, in this particular case, don't even need it because they have the website's cookie. Every time someone logs in successfully, whether it includes MFA or not, the website will send back a cookie that basically says, hey, you've been approved, you authenticated. The hacker can capture that and then paste it into their browser. So here is an example. Kevin is going into his browser, going to the LinkedIn real website. He's not even going to try to log in as the user with their login name and password. He's simply going to inject the stolen cookie into his browser session. He's doing it right here. He's going to open up the admin console, the developer console, copy that stolen cookie into his browser, and simply refresh his browser, and he will be logged in as the victim. And there is the attacker on the real website and as the victim. And this sort of attack would work against probably 90–95% of multi-factor authentication today. So hopefully you heard that. And the tool that Kevin used for this demo was something called Evil Jinx. It's been around for a decade or longer. There really are dozens, if not hundreds, of tools that allow the same thing. And again, it works against most MFA, not all MFA. Like, it doesn't work against FIDO. If you ever heard of FIDO-enabled MFA, this particular attack doesn't work against that. Of course, there's other attacks you can do against it, but at least that attack is stopped. And again, if you want to learn more about it, you can go to those links that I published before. But these sort of attacks are used in the real world. Like, here's an example of somebody complaining where they had their Bitcoin stolen. They were trying to connect to Binance. Binance is probably the world's most famous, popular cryptocurrency exchange in the world. Like Coinbase in America, Coinbase is probably #1. Binance is probably the #1 worldwide. But you see this guy was sent an email that took him to a fake Binance website, and he had authenticated to Binance using Google Authenticator, that Google Authenticator phone code, and the attackers captured it and took over his account and stole his money. And it happens all the time. These accounts have been stolen by the millions. It's literally very, very common today that if you use MFA, that the attackers or their malware creations can capture it. Here's another example of Iranian phishers bypassing 2FA protections offered by Yahoo Mail and Gmail. You can see that when the victims entered their passwords into the fake Gmail or Yahoo security pages, the attackers would almost simultaneously enter the credentials into the real login page. In the case that the target's accounts were protected by 2FA, the attackers would redirect targets to the new page that requested the one-time password, stole it, and then reused it. So very, very common. If you're another type of attack, if your laptop or device gets compromised, called man in the endpoint. The last one was a man in the middle attack. This is man in the endpoint. If a hacker or a malware creation gets on your laptop or your device, it's game over. They can do whatever you can do. But a really common one is that they'll wait for you to log on in, let's say to your bank's website, and malware, there's some malware called Bankos Trojans or Banking Trojan that does this, but they'll actually monitor where your browser goes, what addresses you're typing into your browser. And then when you go to a bank website like Bank of America, they'll wait for you to log on in. And if you're using MFA, they'll wait for you to use your MFA. And when you're finished, they'll start a second hidden browser session that you can't see and transfer all your money to their bank account. First time I read about this attack was back in 1997, I think. It's been used to steal billions of dollars from people. Tens of thousands of people are victims of these sort of things every single month. Here's an example of a cyber syndicate called Gaznim. They got arrested by the feds a couple of years ago. Gaznim, look at this. They were suspected of stealing $100 million from more than 41,000 victims using a stealthy banking Trojan. by the same name. There are hundreds of these groups that go around stealing money from people. All they got to do is trick you into clicking, and downloading the wrong app or getting malware. Like, here's an app they claim to be a memory optimization app. Oh, is your phone, running out of battery too much too soon? You can download this. And sometimes these apps are in the official stores, but if you would have downloaded and installed this particular one, it would wait till you went to PayPal. So it actually monitor where you're going and would wait till you got to PayPal. And if you went to PayPal, it would really quickly start a macro that would transfer as much money as they could from your bank account to their bank account very, very quickly. A lot of malware, most mobile malware today includes the ability to intercept multi-factor authentication codes. Like EventBot is a really popular Android mobile malware. It targets users of over 200 different financial institutions, including bank and money transfer services and cryptocurrency wallets and stock accounts and that sort of stuff. And you can see there kind of in that last sentence that it intercepts two-factor authentication codes as well. So today's mobile malware has no problem capturing your MFA information and then using that against you. SMS-based multi-factor authentication is probably the most popular multi-factor authentication method used on the internet today. It's very insecure. It can be hacked many different ways. Despite that, it's the most popular type of MFA used on the internet. Here's some real examples of MFA codes being sent to me by real companies like Bank of America sent me some MFA codes. Microsoft O365 sent me a verification. Facebook sent me a verification. Marriott sent me a verification. Really, really common to get these SMS-based codes that you then type into a browser. But attackers have at least a dozen different ways to steal that SMS code from you. One of the most common ways is something called SIM swapping. All cell phones have this memory area called subscriber identity module. It used to be a little micro SD chip, and on that SIM chip, it would usually be like you had to plug it into your phone. You had to get like a paper clip to pop it out. But the SIM chip module would contain like your phone number, your account information. It would tie your phone number and your phone to Verizon or T-Mobile or whatever's network. But it would essentially have the information that made your phone your phone. Now with today's phones, you don't have to put in a little memory chip. It's usually just a virtual part of the memory. And when you get a new phone, you usually have to dial your phone company and put in a code. On the new phone, you have to put in like, pound 7172 something, and then it transfers your SIM information from your old phone to your new phone. But attackers learned that they could steal that information. They could actually trick the phone company into sending your SIM information to their phone, and then they would reset all your bank accounts and stock accounts and stuff that would send those SMS codes. Instead of it being sent to your phone, it would be sent to the attacker's phone. So the way that they normally do it is they socially engineer the victim. They usually call the victim and they claim to be the cell phone service going, hey, we're doing some phone upgrade and we need your login name and PIN or something. But then they take that information they've socially engineered from the victim, and they go to the cell phone company and tell the cell phone company, oh, I bought a new phone and I need you to activate my new phone. And when that happens, the victim's old phone will stop accepting new SMS messages and new phone calls, but really it doesn't tell them that. All that happens, they get a little add a network icon on their phone. It takes the average person that's had their phone SIM swapped hours to recognize something's going wrong. At first they think it's just a signal problem, and then it takes them a while to call their phone company. They got to call their phone company from somebody else's phone because their phone doesn't work. And then that cell phone company is like, oh, we transferred your SIM information to the new cell phone. The person's like, I don't have a new cell phone. So it's, these SIM swapping attacks are really easy. They've been used to steal hundreds of millions of dollars from people. Again, most of today's accounts have this SMS reset code. So I could go into your bank, do a SIM swap on you, then tell your bank account to send me a new password. It will send it on SMS, and then I can take over your account. And again, here's all kinds of news stories where one guy had $24 million stolen from a SIM swapping mistake. Reddit, they used to have admins. That's how they work using SMS MFA. That's how Reddit's admins would manage their environment. And one of them got compromised, and then the attackers were able to take over Reddit's information. And I think they stole customer information, tried to insert a Trojan or something like that. You really don't even have to be much of a hacker to do a SIM swap attack. For 16 bucks, I can connect to there's many of these firms on the internet that allow you to do SIM swaps. And you can create a fake letter of authorization, send them 16 bucks, and they'll send your phone number to my phone. It's very, very common, so you don't even have to be much of a hacker. But then again, all I got to do is kind of have a list of your bank accounts, stock accounts, and stuff like that, and then tell them to reset when I get your SMS messages sent to my phone. So what's your defenses? Well, try not to use SMS-based apps. Many times you don't have the choice, but if you do have the choice, do not use any SMS-based MFA. It is considered a really poor authenticator, and you should not be using them if you can get away from it. There's even like another problem with SMS is that you just don't know who it is when someone's contacting you. Like suppose I knew that you had a Gmail account and I wanted to reset it. I could just literally send you a message to your cell phone. I just have to know your cell phone number and go, hey, I'm from Google Security. We've detected a rogue sign-in to your Good Guy account. In order to discern a legitimate login, we're going to send a verification code to your previously registered phone number from another Google support number. Please retype the sent verification code in response to this message, or your account will be permanently blocked or permanently locked. You got to scare them, right? And then the bad guy just simply goes to Google Gmail, puts in your email address, tells Gmail that they forgot your password because they don't know it. Then Gmail will offer different ways to recover the account, and the attacker can choose SMS. Say, send me a verification code. The victim gets that code. That's a real Google verification reset code. And if they're tricked into providing it to the original attacker, well, it's game over. That attacker now has access to that account and will change your password and probably enable MFA in a way that you will never get that account back. And really just keep this in mind that I can send you messages claiming to be anybody. Like, if I want to reset your bank account, I find out, oh, you got a bank account. Here's your email address. And I know that you're a Bank of America customer. Oh, I know that I can reset bank accounts with SMS codes. Well, I can send you a message going, hey, I'm from the county emergency water, board. A large water main break has been detected near your primary place of residence. Do not drink or use the water from the tap until further notice. We apologize for the inconvenience. Do you wish to be enrolled for updates about this event? Yes or no? And if the person says yes, they're like, please stand by. We're going to send you a confirmation code. But what you don't realize, that confirmation code is your bank account or stock account being reset. That code gets sent to you, and if you type it back in response to that other message, it's game over. They've stolen your money. And the problem is that you can't trust anybody to be who they say they are on SMS. I claim to be Bill Gates, the President of the United States, and how do you know? You don't know. Let's see, many times cell phone providers know that their tech support are going to be socially engineered into doing SIM swaps and things like that. So most cell phone or all cell phone providers train their tech support on how not to get socially engineered into giving up your information. But tech support are just humans, and humans try to help each other out. I don't have time to show you this video, but this is a really cool example of how humans will just try to help humans. In this example, a computer security person had his account SIM swapped a couple of times. So he told his cell phone company, never do a SIM swap unless you have this separate PIN number. So it was like, it's a commonly recommended solution. Oh, you want to protect your account from being SIM swapped? Here, protect it with this PIN number, and you have to give the PIN number before your account will be swapped or whatever. So this IT guy wanted to see, could a social engineering attacker somehow still get his information or get his phone reset or whatever from the phone provider? So he went to, I think it was DEF CON, and he talked to this female social engineer. Again, she's a white hat hacker, a good guy, good girl. And what she did was download 2 videos from YouTube of babies crying, and then she called his cell phone provider, and the only information he had is that he used, I think it was T-Mobile or AT&T or something like that, and what his phone number was and his name. But with that, she was able to successfully social engineer the tech support person. What she did again is she called the tech support person at his cell phone company and said, listen, I'm the wife of, Brian or whatever. And Brian told me to switch the phones over. We're moving, and I was supposed to switch the phones over to the new addresses weeks ago. Brian, honey, I'm doing. She's playing these videos of babies crying. She's like, I'm sorry, my babies are sick and I'm trying to feed them. Honey, I'm trying to do it. So she's acting like she is this, beaten housewife, and she asked that that tech support person, hey, can you help me? And the person's like, his password. She takes some fake guesses at passwords, and the tech support person's like, well, what do you think about this password? She's like, oh, that's the password he used to use years ago. And with that, she's able to learn the guy's password, take over the account. She even goes, oh, my daughter's going to college today. Can I order her a new cell phone to be sent to her at college? And the person's like, yep. And that, it's, the best plans, the best defenses can be bypassed because somebody's trying to be helpful to another human being. Here's another type of attack called duplicate code generator. I think most of us are used to, like Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator, where you get this code sent to your phone. Usually it's a 6-digit code, but it could be a 4-digit code or something like that. They're known as one-time passwords. The original MFA that I ever saw, I think that most of us historically ever saw, was a one-time password token called an RSA Secure ID. So this would be this token again with a 6-digit code. Every 30 seconds or every minute that those numbers get updated. Today, one of the most common one-time passwords again is Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator. But the idea is you get this code, and nobody else can get this code. But attackers learn that there is always this shared secret that starts that code. Like that code is just an algorithm, and it uses the serial number of your device or your software instance along with this pre-shared secret, just a randomly generated secret. But that secret and serial number must be in a database, and in order to generate that one-time password, every 30 seconds or every minute, and it's got to be in this shared database. Because it's, they've got to verify that your device has the right number. So that shared secret will be, on your phone or on your device, but also in this authentication database that's stored with the authentication vendor. Well, if an attacker learns these shared secrets, the seeds, as we call them, the seed secrets, they can actually generate a fake instance of that one-time password. The example I have on your screen here is taken from a hacking tool called Canyon-able. I used to use Canyon-able back in the 1990s and early 2000s. You can still download it, although usually it's got a Trojan horse program in it or something. But it even had back then where, again, if I knew your secure key ID and that shared secret, I could then create these additional future instances of these one-time passwords and log in as you. Matter of fact, that's the way it works for all of these one-time passwords, and they've been used in real-life compromises. The most famous compromise was against RSA and the RSA secure IDs. Some Chinese APT broke in, located the server that backed up all the seed values for all the RSA secure IDs, stole them, and then created fake instances of these RSA secure IDs, and eventually broke into Lockheed Martin and other companies. And the way, just amazing. And it still kind of happens today. Google Authenticator is the same thing. Google Authenticator, if you sign up, will usually send you this QR code. That QR code is just really a bunch of numbers encoded into the QR code. But a lot of people will use that QR code and take a picture of it so that if they ever have to restart that Google Authenticator session again, they don't have to re-ask for a new QR code. They can just use the old QR code, and that old QR code never expires. So it's really common for people when they set up their Google Authenticator to have this QR code on their phone in their pictures or in their email, and it never expires. And anybody that comes across that QR code can then, create additional unauthorized instances of that Google Authenticator. And here's an example of someone reporting that, again, they had their Bitcoin stolen. It said the attacker actually broke into their email, and they had left a copy of that QR code key in their email. And then the attacker created a second unauthorized instance of Google Authenticator and then used those codes to take over the person's Bitcoin account. And then, again, this happens all the time. It's fairly common. That QR code is nothing that you get from Google Authenticator is nothing but an 80-bit secret key. And the United States government says really it should be a 128-bit secret key. But forget that. The problem is that if anyone gets a hold of that QR code and converts it to the number, and they also know the Google Authenticator algorithm, well, they can turn it into a one-time password code for that device. Well, it turns out that the Google Authenticator code algorithm is known. It was a public project, and you can still go to GitHub, download software called Pharaoh, and that basically implements the Google Authenticator code and software. And if you have that base 32 secret, you've captured that information, it will start to generate additional instances for you. A lot of times, the attacks that get around MFA are that the attacker sees MFA, but then goes to see, can I reset it? Like, you can always reset passwords. A lot of times you can reset your MFA. It's really common with MFA for people to lose their MFA instance or lose their Google key or authenticator. And so Microsoft and Google and other big MFA vendors will have this reset, this site that allows you to reset it and get a new instance or start using a password instead or something like that. Well, attackers many times will downgrade your MFA to to something else or reset it. Some of the earlier ways that would be done is that the provider, the authentication provider, MFA provider, would send you a reset code in your email. And so attackers would just learn what is your account where that reset code would be sent. They then socially engineer you and compromise that account and then get your security code sent to that account and take over and bypass your MFA. That's really, really common. The worst type of password reset recovery thing are these questions like, what's your mother's maiden name? What's your favorite car or whatever? These are called personal knowledge questions. They're absolutely horrible and they should be outlawed. But unfortunately, many websites still require these password reset questions. They're just terrible. Like, I don't know why anyone would think that your mother's maiden name would ever be a secret that someone couldn't look up, or your, let's say your favorite car. Your password could be like a trillion different things, but your favorite car is going to be, there's only like 100 different car models. They don't change that much year to year. And I can probably guess your favorite car within about 10 guesses. Your car is probably going to be closer to a Mustang or a Lamborghini or a Lexus or a Porsche or, something like that. It's probably not going to be an AMC Gremlin or Pacer or Ford Escort or something like that. But, or another one of my favorite questions, who's your favorite vet, veterinarian? As an attacker, all I'd have to do is look up like all the different veterinarians within 5 miles of your house, and I'm probably going to figure out which one of them is your doctor. Matter of fact, Google did a research paper called Secret Lies and Account Recovery Lessons from the use of personal knowledge questions at Google. And they found out that some recovery questions can be guessed on the first try 20% of the time. So 1 out of 5 questions can be guessed on the first try. 40% of the time, people are unable to successfully recall their own recovery answers, which I think it means they're only half as likely as the hacker to guess it. Or I guess it means call a hacker. If you forget what your answer is, call a hacker. They have half as much of a chance of guessing it as you do. And about 1/6 of the answer to be found in a person's social media profile. There have been well-known attacks where people's accounts got taken over. Probably the most famous was Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin was running with John McCain for president and vice president of the United States against Obama and Biden. A Democratic operative's kid hacked her Yahoo account. The questions that it asked him, where she met her husband, which he had looked up on the internet, found out it was in high school. It asked her favorite sport. She was on the state champion basketball team, so he put in basketball. He guessed that correctly. And then it asked for her current zip code, and Wasilla, Alaska, where she lives, only has 2 zip codes. So it wasn't that hard, and he was able to steal her email. Unfortunately, he bragged about it, got arrested, and put in jail. But my solution for these sort of things, if you have to give them, is never put in real answers. Treat them as passwords. Like, what's your mother's maiden name? Pizza 32. What's your favorite car? Pizza 85. I actually I then write down the question and my fake answer in my password manager for that website, but just never put in the real answer. What's your mother's maiden name? You're just asking for someone to hack you. What's your father's birth date? Is there anybody that can't look that up on the internet? So anyways, that's my answer there. Biometrics, a lot of people love biometrics. I'm not a huge fan of biometrics for a lot of reasons, including they're really not nearly as accurate as the biometric vendors tell you they are. But also, once your biometric attributes, suppose you use your fingerprints, if they get compromised by an attacker, what are you going to do the rest of your life? Like I, along with tens of millions of other people, or 5.6 million other people, had my fingerprints stolen by Chinese advanced persistent threat in June 2015. Chinese APT broke into the Office of Ombudsman, or the OPM Office of Personnel Management, and stole everybody's fingerprints, anyone that had ever applied for a U.S. government security clearance. including people that work at the NSA and FBI and Army and stuff in June 2015. And my fingerprints, all 10 of my fingerprints were stolen. And for the rest of my life, how can any system that requires my fingerprint to log in really know it's me or any of the 5.6 million people? And you know that people's biometric attributes get stolen all the time. Here's an example. A couple of years ago with a BioStar platform, a fingerprint and facial recognition vendor, they had over 1 million fingerprints that were possibly breached. And when the security researchers told BioStar about it, BioStar wouldn't even correspond with them, wouldn't fix. They were largely unresponsive. And again, 1 million fingerprints could have gone out and other people were using them forever. Biometrics just aren't nearly as accurate as they claim. In my company, like at KnowBe4, I think I was employee like 500th, and my fingerprints matched some previous employee. We actually did go from using my first finger to my second finger, and that is not unusual. And in large biometric fingerprint and facial recognition scan databases, people are constantly being flagged for each other. Or look at this. Facial recognition doesn't work intended on 42 of the 110 tested smartphones, so people could hack around them. It included Lenovo phones, LG phones, Nokia phones, Samsung phones, Sony phones. And people, oh, I got an iPhone. Nope, we can hack those too. I have people that use Windows Hello with biometric, with the facial identifier on Windows Hello, and they will email me. I get someone email me about once every week or two telling me that their infant or toddler walks by and the laptop logs in the infant or the toddler as them. Well, that's certainly a problem. So here I showed you lots of different ways you could hack around MFA. I only showed you 12, but if you like, my book has like over 50. But here's the key takeaways. MFA is not unhackable. I can hack any MFA solution at least a couple different ways. A lot of them 11, 10, 11, 12 different ways. All MFA is hackable. MFA does not prevent phishing or social engineering from being successful. It's good. Everybody should use it where they can, but it's not unbreakable. But you should try to buy and use phishing resistant MFA whenever you can, if you have a choice. And I've told you, don't use SMS based and that sort of stuff. Try to avoid any MFA solution that you can easily socially engineer around. So that if your MFA solution, if I can send you a fake link, that man-in-the-middle attack, that first attack that I showed you, and your MFA doesn't know that it's a man-in-the-middle website doing the capturing and not the real person, which again is 90–95% of all MFA, you should try to avoid using that type of solution. Let me say, it's not just me saying this. U.S. government's been saying since 2017 not to use easily phishable MFA, including in 2017 in the Digital Identity Guidelines. That's NIST Special Publication 800-63. They said don't use any MFA that uses SMS-based or call-based or any MFA that is tied to your phone number. They said don't use. And then in executive orders by President Biden in 2021 and 2022, if you look, they said don't use phishing hackable MFA such as SMS or voice calls, or one that supplies one-time codes or receives push notifications. So if you look, it says the U.S. government, Biden in 2021 and 2022 said you shouldn't use MFA if it's based on phone numbers or SMS or voice calls or supplies, one-time codes, or you get those push notifications to approve. U.S. government said they're too easily hacked and you should not use them. And again, they reiterated this again with a clarification memo in 2022. It says you must use phishing-resistant MFA. And for public users, phishing-resistant MFA must be an option. Unfortunately, most MFA is not phishing resistant, and but you should try to your best. You should educate yourself and people at work to know that most MFA, there's ways to hack around it, and you may have to use it, but educate yourself, educate the end users how to use the particular MFA solution, educate them how it could be hacked around, what the MFA does and doesn't prevent. And if you do that, you'll be a lot more solid user of MFA. The problem is most people are given MFA and they are told, or they mistakenly believe that, oh, it prevents all these attacks. And it does prevent some attacks. It doesn't prevent everything, and you need to realize that. So you should not use easily phishable MFA. If some people go, well, what's that? You got a list of what the non-phishable MFA is? I do. And that second link there, I have a list that I update all the time called My List of Good Strong MFA, and has a list of all the MFA I know that is phishing resistant. So with that, I've kind of finished up my 40 minutes here. I'm going to take some questions if y'all have any. If I don't get to your questions, you can always email me at rogerg@noble4.com, and you can always follow me at LinkedIn and Twitter. But with that, I'm hoping Marcus or Camille that we had some questions come in.
So the first one is, what is the best form of MFA that is most resistant to phishing? I think you provided the link.
So I would say go to the link. There's lots of it, like Fido and things like that. There's a lot of good stuff out there. It's just unfortunate that most people aren't using it.
Right. Okay. All right. And then if you're interested in the link, I will send it over to you, and Roger's presentation as well. We have another one here. Is there a way to evaluate the effectiveness or the strength of the MFA that they are currently using?
Yeah, there is. We even have on our website a free tool called the Multi-Factor Security Assessment, Multi-Factor Authentication Security Assessment tool. And all it is something that asks you questions about your MFA. So you go to it, it will ask you like 12 to 20 questions just to get an idea from my brain about what type of MFA you use. And then it will spit out a report and tell you how it could or couldn't be hacked. You could also read my book or read any of my link. I talk about this a lot, and my book has a couple of chapters dedicated to evaluating MFA. But again, if you want to see it really quickly, you can go download the free Noble 4 Multi-Factor Authentication Security Assessment tool.
I think that's everything for now, but if you have questions going forward, you can reach us at info@interware.ca. And if you wish to run through the presentation and look over the links and tricks mentioned by Roger, I'll also be sending the recorded webinar and the presentation deck for your reference. Thank you very much again to the wonderful speakers, and thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing everyone in the next webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care, everyone.